Yeah, I would have to say hypocrisy in the way that this particular example of quote unquote neo-Nazi sort of sentiment is depicted versus other examples of when that sort of comes up as an issue elsewhere in society.
Okay, Intel Schizo, let's get you in here real quick, and then we'll get into all source and Troy after that. Go ahead.
Yes. So
Oh,
to
Igor.
Michael.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. So to Michael's point, you are correct that those quotes and statements happened in their timeline. But let's look at what also happened in that same general couple month period. So April 7th of 2020, the United States State Department and executive orders from Donald Trump listed the Russian imperial movement and its members and leadership as a a specially designated global terrorist organization. That has not happened with Azov. And in the beginning of, or you could say the late fiscal year 2018 and early fiscal year 2019, then President Donald Trump announced a lethal aid to Ukraine that included Stingers among, other munitions. So if this Azov battalion was such a huge problem, if we look at the actions of the United States government, seems to point to that Azov is not this huge, massive problem when the actions conducted by the United States government were giving weapons at the same time of these statements and listing Russian-based organizations as foreign terrorist organizations and global terrorist networks.
The
And
U.S.
specifically
government, in its
sanctioned.
National Defense Authorization Bill last month, December 2022, reinserted the prohibition on any armaments being provisioned to the Azov regiment. That's in the bill that was passed last month.
I need to see the page number because there was a whole
I'm
bunch of
happy to send you
drafts.
the page number.
That'd be great because there was a whole bunch of drafts. I'm not, trying to doubt you, but there was about, I think, like 50 to 80 different drafts. I know some people have quoted as like, oh, like this and that, and it's like those were in the earlier drafts. There were so many of them this year. So if you got this specific page number in the final, what was actually passed, that'd be great. And then to Kim's point with Yanukovych, if this was such a coup, Yanukovych has not ever stated that he's still the president of Ukraine. He has not done any steps to establish a government in exile. And in fact, he is like when President Zelensky was elected, Yanukovych recognized that election and said, "You are the president." He congratulated him on his land sweeping victory. And I mean, Zelensky was like, "Yeah, whatever." But
Yeah,
I
you
mean,
know why? Because
Yanukovych has relinquished any claims to being the president of Ukraine. So in
well,
terms of calling this a
let's just be
coup, it's
clear.
not really a coup if the guy who was ousted has recognized the new government
Yeah.
and has
So
not established a government in exile.
let's just
Yeah,
be
Kim,
clear
go ahead.
why Zelensky supported or got the support from Yanukovych, because during his election campaign, he promised Ukrainians to bring peace with Russia. That was the reason why he was elected, and that is the reason why he got the support from Yanukovych. And unfortunately, he betrayed the Ukrainian people and did nothing to further the peace.
So if I can answer that, I think one of the fundamental misunderstandings, and because they frame it as a coup, let's not forget Yanukovych was impeached with significant amount of MPs from his own party impeaching him. Right, he was impeached in a democratic process as defined by the Constitution of Ukraine, and there was an agreement that Yanukovych agreed to allow this early votes to occur prior to the Revolution of Dignity in 2014. So he made the agreement and he left. That's not
Why
how
don't we let
generally.
Igor? Why don't we let Igor reply to
And
that?
but
Yeah,
before
let's.
I'll push it to Igor. But if I just
Can I
want one.
please, because it's exactly level my expertise and I met Yanukovych in person. First of all, it was not legitimate impeachment procedure. If you read in Constitution of Ukraine and all that experts supposed to study something in law of Ukraine, something in history of Ukraine. you will see that so impeachment procedure is practically copycat in American. So it need to be special prosecutor appointed, and after that, it's supposed to be voted twice, and after that, constitutional court supposed to make a verdict. So Yanukovych just flee for his life because he was on a kill list, and the people was already coming after him, and that was not Ukrainian special forces. That's first. Second, why this so important to understand illegitimacy of this coup in 2014? If it's not happened in 2014, Russian troops never will cross the border of independent and prosperous Ukraine. So the selection of Europe orientation bring to Ukraine only poverty, limiting Ukrainian human rights, because honestly, anyone who's saying this is not a Nazi state, you need to understand that only Nazi state banning any kind of independent voices, shutting down TV channels, killing writers and journalists, and after that, all of this prohibiting political parties, etc., and encouraging and glorifying national radicals who was openly collaborated with Nazi regime, such as Stepan Bandera, Mykola Lebed, Shukhevich, and other, and other, and other. So why this so many times question of Ukrainian Nazi existence pumping up? Because Nazi and they cover up in government relentlessly deny the existence. They say, no, this is not a Nazi. This is just a tattoo. You know what? My mom lost her right arm during the World War II because of German landmine, and Nazi bring the war to country when I was born, when 27 million was dying. That's a first. I have a personal account to all Nazi movement. Yes, Russia, as other states, has a neo-Nazi movement, but Russian government never openly, as Ukrainian government, Russian president never openly encouraged them, never glorified them, prohibit, prosecute them under the law. That's second bullshit. This is a Wagner group. It's a Nazi movement. No, not at all. It's a private contractor. That's a private military corporation. It's only one private military corporation, by the way, who take the entire town. But the question of Nazi, starting not today, not 2014, that's have a roots in a deeper history of Ukraine. First of all, idea to carve part of Russian Empire out of Russia was not Ukrainian idea. That was of William Gabsburg, who also known in Ukraine as Vasil Vyshyvanny. In the beginning of 19th century, come with that idea because he want to have his state and he want to have a kingdom of Ukraine. You know what he did? He failed on everything, but he met a little boy, 12-year-old, with name Stepan Bandera, and he, I'm sorry, groomed him, and he also was a pervert, and that guy seed the seeds of that ideology in Stepan Bandera minds. During the World War II, you know why Stalin was so mad on the entire Ukraine? Because level of collaboration of Ukrainians with the Nazi occupied forces was close to 50%. Why, you can ask? Because Ukraine was all the time on the border of empire, and they master a skill of flipping the sides and working with Nazi. But it was a lot of Nazi collaborators who ran away out of Ukraine, who actually settled in United States and Canada and Australia, and who supporter of Ukrainian regime because they know what they're doing. Anyways,
so Igor, I need you to
yep. Go ahead. I can finish. My statement is, if you want to understand, this is not Russia who train in summer camps kids. It is not Russia who making the recruitment video, and this is unbelievably matching to if you see, it look like Nazi, it smell like Nazi. It's probably Nazi. This is it.
Just very quickly
Igor,
to
hey,
give the
Michael,
citation
hey.
for the
Michael, I need to get Mark in here because he's got to go soon.
Can I just give a very quick factual citation for the person who asked for the reference?
Very quickly, man.
Yes,
Quickly,
very
I gotta
quickly.
get to Mark.
2 seconds. It's the omnibus spending bill. It was signed into law by Biden December 29th. Not the defense authorization bill. I apologize. The omnibus spending bill, page 406, section 8138, quote, none of the funds made available by this act may be used to provide arms training or other assistance to the Azov battalion. It's the exact copy of the text that was first introduced by Ro Khanna in 2018. It's obviously somewhat out of date because it's now the Azov regiment, not battalion, but it's in the text of the bill that was signed into law, page 406, right below the prohibition of funds made available to the Wuhan Institute of Virology.
Mark, jump in, man. You spent a lot of time in Russia and in the former Soviet Union, so you have a little bit of a point of view, from the Russian perspective. You lived in Russia and Tajikistan for extended periods of time, so your opinion on this would be very valuable. So go ahead, man.
Yeah, so just a little bit of background. I'm a nuclear engineer by training, but have not worked in the nuclear sector itself, or at least until recently, because I was doing advocacy work trying to stop Europeans from closing down their nuclear plants and trying to stop California and New York and other states from shutting down their nuclear plants, which was all the rage until very, very recently. So the reason why I know a lot of you guys who have asked me to be on the space or talk to me about it is because in the opening days of the war, Russian troops captured the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant. So I wanted to put a little bit of a real issue in front of us, because I'm actually honestly very curious what Kim and Michael and others might say. We have a facility. It's the largest power plant in Europe. When it's running full blast, it makes power for between 10 and 20 million people, depending on which level of electricity use. To build a copy of Zaporizhzhia, say in the United States, would take between $40 and $80 billion. It is 6 pressurized water reactors, the main type used around the world. They're fairly modern, they're well upgraded, and they wouldn't wear out for another 40, 50 years. So the reason I bring up Zaporizhzhia is because the plant, although all the reactors have been turned off, so there's not like an immediate danger of them having some catastrophic meltdown and blasting apart or anything like that. There's not even a particular big danger of them just having melted fuel in the cores. It's physically possible, but unlikely now that the plant is turned off. This is an incredibly valuable facility that was taken in war by Russia. And for me, a lot of what I try to understand about the Ukraine conflict is what resolutions would mean for the nuclear plant that's the first ever, the only ever to be captured in war. So I guess a question I'd ask is, this is an obscenely valuable industrial facility. Russia is struggling to find the personnel available in Russia to put this plant back in service, to produce electricity for the surrounding regions. Ukraine is extremely upset about this plant being taken. The nuclear world tried to be as collegial as possible in the opening months, but sentiment is hardening quite seriously in the rest of the world, as Rosatom, the world's leading nuclear company in many ways, is being drawn directly into this conflict at the deepest levels, including in consolidating Russian hold on Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant. So as Nick said, I don't have a ton of time, unfortunately, but any questions people have about the nuclear situation, what's happened, what might happen, my direct messages are always open. I always review them. And yeah, so I think that putting my own chips on the table, I was somebody who was a huge admirer of the Russian nuclear program. They are some of the most capable and outstanding project delivery people and technical folks in the whole world. Russia is still building the majority of exported plants on Earth. Nuclear plants being built by Rosatom abroad include in Egypt, in Turkey, in Bangladesh, in Iran, in India, in China, and several other places. These are critically important projects for the host nations. They need these projects to continue. It's only European countries that were planning to get nuclear reactors that have either canceled or have the project seriously delayed by the war. But the rest of the world, the rest of the nuclear world that I guess I'm part of, sees the occupation of Zaporizhzhia as extremely bad, as perhaps permanently damaging relationships with the Russian nuclear world, whereas Russia was a key cooperative component of it before. So I put it to the other speakers. What sort of settlement would you expect to see around the biggest power plant in Europe, still an incredibly valuable and young facility that's a jewel in the crown industrially, strategically for Ukraine, something almost intolerable for them to see left in Russian hands, and therefore a target for retaking in battle?
Yeah,
Yeah,
so,
well,
so Kim, I'd like to pose that to you. Yeah, absolutely. Go
yeah,
ahead.
so it's really quite simple, right? Between 1971 and 1977, the Soviet Union built that power plant, and it's part of the eastern part of Ukraine and the southern part of Ukraine that has primarily Russian ethnicity. And the reason it has been taken by Russia is because that area is considered by Russia to be ethnic Russians that have all, in the recent voted to become a part of Russia. Now, let's not talk about the legitimacy of that vote. I do understand that there's a lot of criticism about how that took place in war times, but it is everyone has to acknowledge and understand that these areas are historically known to be primarily Russian speaking, of Russian ethnicity. Once these conflicts started, they were
But
siding with
what's
Russia.
that got to do with the question that Mark posed? It's nothing to do with
Well, the
ethnicity.
question
It's
is
about nuclear
the
power.
question is
Nothing to do with
the
ethnicity.
question was, Piotr, before you interrupted me, what is the future of this power plant? What should happen with it? And clearly, if it's now in the new areas that have voted to become part of Russia, it should remain within these areas. And it was built by the Soviet Union in 1971. So, they will certainly have the people and the capacity to keep the power plant running.
Yeah, Piotr?
Well, yeah. Again, I break and I come back in, and it's what I said as I left. Like, this is literally we go to a talking point which unrelated to the question that was posed by Mark. It's nothing to do with ethnicity
Hey,
or the
Piotr, can you put your mic
association.
closer to you, man?
Yeah, it's nothing to do with the association of ethnicities. We're literally talking about the capability of a nuclear power plant to be operationally functional, whether or not it's under Ukrainian or Russian hands. I don't understand Kim's response. It doesn't answer what Mark
But then you didn't
asking.
listen
Sorry,
to the
let me just
question.
in. Let me
Then
just
you
in.
didn't
I think
listen to the question, Piotr. Clearly, you didn't hear what Mark was asking. The question was, what should the future of this power plant be, and what does this mean in the context of this war for Ukraine? And all I'm trying to explain is that this power plant is now in the territory of Russia. As you know, these 4 regions have asked to join Russia, and Russia has now integrated them into their country. So they are de facto Russian right now. And
No,
the power
sorry,
plant, yes,
Kim.
they
Korea
are.
is about
That is how
60%. No,
that is
that's just
how
incorrect.
Piotr. Let me finish my point. That is how Russia sees it. It's now part of Russia. The nuclear plant is now part of Russia. The Soviet Union has built it, and they clearly also have the capacity and the people to run it. And that is the reason why Ukraine keeps shelling this power plant, because they don't want to give it up.
So, all source, I want to go to you on that. Piotr, if you can take your mic, and we'll go back to you here in a second. But all source, I'd like your opinion on that.
Hey, so sorry to jump in. I do have to run out. I did get a few messages from a number of folks. Kim, thank you for the answer. Yeah, Piotr, I think Kim pretty much understood my question pretty well, but comments, or sorry, in my direct messages, what the safety risk is if cooling fails, if there's a disaster with, say, the dam upriver from the nuclear plant. At this point, because the reactors have been shut down for a number of months, some of them for almost the entirety of the war, others just recently, the decay heat level continues to fall enough that even a complete failure of all cooling, emergency or otherwise, and loss of grid power would lead to a very slowly unfolding incident, and that the energetic level of the reactors is now so low and the strength of the containment so high that it would be very difficult even to intentionally cause a crisis with the plants at this point. That was not true earlier in the war. Earlier in the war, the reactors were at, a number of them were at high power, and a disruption, sudden disruption of cooling and interruption of emergency cooling procedures would have led to a series, potentially a series of meltdowns, which still would have been contained within the containment shells, within the containment domes, unless there was an intentional effort to damage or crack open those zones. At that point, there still would have been a difficult thing to actually lead to casualties from that amount of radiation, but we're now ventured off into what hopefully will remain science fiction. The reactors are shut down. Even a cooling accident at this point is relatively minor. The rest of Ukraine is still running off of nuclear electricity. I've heard stories from folks in Europe of Ukrainians buying electric vehicles because the grid and the nuclear reactors left and the other three plants in the rest of Ukraine are cheap enough and valuable enough as an energy source to replace gasoline, which makes a very weird situation now for a country to be the only one to have a Chernobyl type event, to have the only nuclear plant captured in war, and to now be possibly the most nuclear dependent nation on the planet, above that of even France. Thanks for having me on. I'm still going to listen to the debate as a listener for a few minutes, but you guys can send me any questions and hopefully I'll be able to rejoin at a longer time. Thanks, Kim, for the engagement, and best wishes for the rest of the night.
Yeah, well, Mark, we'll be here for several episodes, so if you want to jump back in, just send me a DM. But All Source, I want your opinion on this. Jump in.
I mean, I think the notion that he's saying that because a hastily, I mean, it just goes back to my original point, right? I mean, somehow a hastily done referendum in Zaporizhzhia during an active war zone is somehow a legitimate referendum that Russia now has all the rights to utilize the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. It's absurd. I mean, it's absolutely absurd. The right answer should be, first of all, it is Ukrainian. Second of all, if there's a dispute between both, there are international organizations like the International Atomic Energy Agency that can serve as observers to ensure that everything done in that plant is done accordingly, safely, and power is provided to the region. Right? Russia, just because they did a bullshit referendum, cannot just claim, oh, but by the way, Russia actually claims the entirety of the Zaporizhzhia Oblast based on that referendum, and they don't even have control of the entirety of the Zaporizhzhia Oblast. They don't even have control of the largest city of the Zaporizhzhia Oblast, that you would think that if this referendum was legitimate, the citizens of Zaporizhzhia would have a vote. They couldn't vote in the referendum. And yet somehow Russia claims those as well as part of their territory. It's just nonsense. It should be observed by the IAEA. And I understand it's a war zone. Russia will never relinquish control of it until they get kicked out by the Ukrainian military. So at least neutral observers and an agreement between both sides, which for the most part, it looks like it's holding, with some concerns, of no military actions within that area.
Great, thanks. Piotr, has your mic been fixed? I'll bring you back in.
Yeah. So I just want to make one thing very clear. None of these. It hasn't. I can hear you completely fine.
I can't hear you though, so we're gonna go to inner skits.
I can hear Nick. Nick, I can hear Piotr.
Yes, but he cuts in now. That's the issue here. So we're gonna go to Intel skits.
Okay, Michael, I did want. Thank you for coming back with the citation there. I did want to clarify that. So you are correct again with that citation. So there is something that is interesting with the omnibus, right? So NDAA is completely separate from the rest of the government funding throughout the fiscal year. So all that is saying, what you read off earlier, is that the funding that is granted through the omnibus spending bill will not be used to fund Azov, as per that 2018 previous law that was passed. So that's all it's saying is, in this bill, which is the omnibus, none of this money that's being allocated throughout the general government budget will not be used to do X, right? But the NDAA is completely different and does not mention this at all. So under the National Defense Authorization Act, funding under that can't be appropriated to fund the Azov Battalion Regiment, whatever they're calling it.
Yep. Yeah. So finish up that point. Your mic seems to be going away from your face a little bit. So finish up that point.
No, it's not that. Michael
don't think
accidentally unmuted. That's why. Go ahead,
sorry,
Michael.
sorry. Yeah, I was just gonna say I don't think that explanation is actually right. Sorry, I'm not sure what your name is. No, I'm not trying to be derogatory there. I genuinely don't know. But when Ro Khanna, the congressman from California, who at one time was the leading proponent in the entire Congress on this issue, but then basically reneged on it once the war started and pretended like he had never paid it much mind before. When he first inserted this provision into law in 2018, it was also in the omnibus spending bill. So that's the vehicle by which that prohibition on provision of weaponry or other resources to Ukraine was first enacted, and it was just replicated in December of last year for the 2023 spending. So it has nothing per se to do with the NDAA. I misspoke before when I said that provision was included in the NDAA. It's actually in the omnibus spending bill. But yeah, it's almost immaterial because there's not a whole lot of apparent enforcement associated with this prohibition. I mean, who the hell knows if Azov has been able to utilize resources that originate with the U.S. government over the course of the war since February of 2022. I mean, it's very probable that they have, but it's not like the Ro Khanna has some sort of well-funded regulatory body that's been constituted to oversee that prohibition being enforced. But all the same, it is true that the prohibition was reinserted in the omnibus bill last year, and it was reinserted even though in September and October, representatives of the Azov Regiment actually traveled to the United States on a lobbying tour where they met with Ukraine American civic groups. There were instances of them raffling off patches featuring their Wolfsangel insignia, which a lot of people seem to justifiably think is neo-Nazi in origin, but nobody really seemed to care. They met with members of Congress, and I saw an interview with one of them where they were expressing hope that they could actually lobby Congress to remove that technical prohibition on provision of armaments to Azov, but for whatever reason, it didn't come to pass. But anyway, yeah, that's basically my summary there.
Yeah, awesome. Troy, jump in, man.
All right, thanks, Nick. Always happy to wait. We got a deep panel here.
Good panel here. That's why.
Exactly.
Actually, let me just say right here, just to jump in, I need you guys to go up to the top, to the pinned post, sign up for the newsletter. We'll summarize this entire 9-hour and 42-minute space that we've been in so far. You'll get the top issues, the top answers from some of our expert panelists here. And then also, we're going to need some questions here soon from you guys. So go to that bottom right-hand corner, click on that purple button there, and respond. Leave your reply, leave your questions for our panelists, and we're going to circle back to him here shortly. So, Troy, jump in.
Thanks. So a couple things on the Banderites and the Ukrainian. Again, I'm going to call it a myth that it's some a mystical, or I'm sorry, too many adjectives. That it's a hub of Nazism that's unique in the world. It's not. They do have a history, and Stepan Bandera is a nationalist hero in Ukraine. It's a lot less black and white, but you can't take away the fact that he was a collaborator. The reason he was collaborating against the Soviets. The Ukrainians had already suffered a Holodomor, a famine that was engineered as punishment for non-compliance to keep them subservient. It's documented. There was millions and millions of deaths. So I know it's pretty black and white to say, I mean, it seems pretty black and white to say, the Nazis are bad guys, and I'll never disagree with that. But it was a pretty deep, a nuanced situation, if you will. And I'd like to just posit the hypothetical that if let's say that because I don't think this will ever happen. Let's say the Chinese invaded the United States. They came in from Alaska and the Pacific. Um, with beachheads, in like I said, in Alaska and on the Pacific coast. There would be, we have a lot of guns in this country for better or worse, and I have no doubt that, all those militias that have been training for whatever would be activated along with our armed forces if needed, and do what we need to do. Like the Japanese said, a gun behind every blade of grass. So in that, I think the global propaganda, we could agree, would go right to the nationalist militias and their history. Maybe you had some guys training with neo-Nazi type militias when they're in their 20s, the Proud Boys, Adam Waffen, well, whatever you want to call them. But now they're fighting for their country against an invasion, and they're fighting for their sovereignty. So I don't think these are not avowed Nazis. There is not a secret cabal of Nazis in Ukraine and Azov. The iconography, that's all an homage to Bandera and resistance of the Soviets, and you can see how that parallels now with their, literally, undergoing an invasion and a genocide from Russia.
Okay, I want to ask Igor this first, and then I want Patrick and Piotr to chime in as well. Talking about the Azov Battalion, why are they being called Nazis? Why is the Azov Battalion called Nazis? What does that go back to? What is the evidence for that?
First of all, we're not calling Nazi only Azov regime. It's a corpus, or it's not battalion. There was a battalion in the very beginning, 2014. This entire system is now Nazi system. This including the President Zelensky, who proceeded to be converted to the Nazi ideology. And to people who saying that Jewish ascent cannot be Nazi, no. Adolf Hitler have a Jewish blood. He was most notorious Nazi ever. And
That
his
is
entire
that is
system
not
Oh
including...
my
that is
Jesus
not
Christ,
correct.
dude.
No, I'm sorry, but it's a fact. It's a
That is not a
historical
Nick,
fact.
fact.
Nick,
It's
this
an
is actually quite
alternative
insulting.
fact, maybe.
Let me finish,
Quite
please.
Hang on,
insulting.
Piotr.
This
I'll
is
not interrupt
absolutely
you, Piotr.
no. It's Nick.
Piotr,
No,
I
it's
will not
disgusting.
interrupt
This is not
anyone.
We're
okay.
going straight
Igor
to
is
you,
Can I
Piotr.
disgusting.
continue?
Hang on.
Can I continue? Thank you.
Continue, then we'll go
So,
straight to Piotr afterwards.
So, first of all, this entire system, what is the science of Nazi regime? What is the science of fascism? What is the science? This is first of all, one nation is more important, one race is more important than others. This is Ukrainian ideology, Ukraine for Ukrainians, and so on. Second, the freedom of speech banned. So nobody can speak in Ukraine, and it was getting worse and worse from 2014 until complete ban of any independent media. Third, political party is banned. It's not only one party what was banned when Viktor Medvedchuk was a leader, whom they accuse, actually a very good statement, who know how to run the state because he was working under President Kuchma 2 terms. And any others that also that encouraging people to cause the harm to people who have a different ideology or different political views, projecting the brutal force of that regime to anyone. And Azov was created by the guy, and after that was elevated by Minister of Internal Affairs Arsen Avakov. He incorporated in the National Guard of Ukraine. He actually spreaded this ideology to Ukrainian military, and now Ukrainian military totally infested by Nazi ideology. So
Yeah.
this is
So
not a...
Piotr, I need
Wait
to
a second.
respond to this because I know Igor's
Uh-huh.
made a lot of points.
Yeah. Okay. So this is why.
I'm really quite disgusted and angered with you, Nick. To be honest, this is just absolutely just I don't know.
Well, and one question, Igor, is for example, you're saying that
can you not hear me?
this whole idea of like Ukrainians are for Ukraine. First of all, there's many people who live in Ukraine who are not Ukrainians. There's and other nationalities. Ukraine is not a perfect by any means. Is Ukraine is not a perfect country. I'm sure there's some levels of racism, but there I've gotten DMs from people saying, I had a DM from someone from Iraq, for example, saying that she's never felt more embraced. This idea, I mean, sure, there are some people who might have some ideologies or who are racist and hateful, but this idea that this is prevalent everywhere and to state as fact, I'm having a hard time being neutral here. I've tried to
First of
moderate
all,
it.
you don't need to have it very wide. If only passionate part of society have a right to project the power and to
You don't
project
see
the
that in
violence,
Russia,
this is
Igor.
no,
You don't.
never. No one
It's stated
organization, no
on
one
national
NGO,
television,
no
which
one
I watch
foundation
in
in Russia
Russian.
cannot project the violence. Only in Ukraine, neo-Nazi
In
group
violence. What do
allowed
you mean
to project
violence?
the violence. I mean physical violence. I mean killing, beating people, stabbing them, burning them alive. That's what I mean.
Just
Exactly. And
random
government
people.
losing complete control when another group have a right to project the violence. This is how they keeping people
But
to
they're not.
the
But what
speak.
do you mean?
This
But
is
they're not
how they
doing.
intimidating them. They killing the journalists. They kill Ales Buzina, my colleague, whom I know very well, in 2015 because he's
For what?
writing. They for what? For his books because he was definitely on the side of Russian-speaking population and he addressed it
Well, but
openly
Igor,
and
you're
he was
saying
killed.
you're claiming that people are
Before he was
making.
killed, his name was posted on a notorious website Peacekeeper, where is my name as well, whereas Daria Dugina name was until she was assassinated.